Hey everybody, welcome to the Magic Binge. This is a channel where I talk about nerd stuff. I talk about TV shows, movies, and books that I like. So if you're into any of that kind of stuff, feel free to check things out, You can leave a like, you can subscribe, and I also like comments. Please comment and join the conversation. So, welcome to my channel. Before I get into today's video, I do want to go ahead and give a disclaimer that this is a channel for super nerds. So, if you're not into spoilers, please click away because I always give spoilers for all seasons, every episode, every chapter, everything. Because we do some deep dives here. So, if you're not into that, just go ahead and click out. So, this is a an idea that's kind of been festering in my mind for a while, and it's the Handmaid's Tale as a game of chess. So I am a person who really enjoys playing chess. I'm no expert by any means, no grandmaster or anything, but if I'm at a party and there's a chessboard involved, I'm going to find a person and we're going to play together. I like the strategy. I like to apply it to life and hierarchies and everything. So real big fan of chess here. So I just want to break down the series of Handmaid's Tale if it was a game of chess. So I'll just go ahead and get into it. As we know, in chess, we have white pieces and we have our dark pieces. So I'm going to go ahead and say that Gilead is the white side because the white side moves first in chess. They're the aggressors. So Gilead does the aggressing on just the regular people. And so we'll call the black side the resistance. So Gilead makes first move, they're the white side. Black side is the resistance. They're the reactive side. They fight back. And they had to be strategic because obviously they're going to have fewer pieces because they move second. So I'll start with the black side as far as who I think the pieces will represent. So black side is the resistance, right? I would say June Osborne is our queen. The queen is the most powerful piece on the board. She moves in all directions and influences every corner of the game. That's June. She is unpredictable, she's resourceful, and she's always central to the resistance's strategy. She affects people on both sides, and she makes bold plays, and she's willing to risk everything. And her ability to adapt is probably her deadliest weapon. We've seen that girl just get herself out of some situations. She can make moves. So June Osborne, queen all day. So Nick Blaine, I would say I felt weird about placing him on both sides, especially after we saw his actions in towards the end of the last season. Kind of stopped rooting for Nick, kind of realized maybe I was romanticizing his role in the resistance because really he was just helping out of his love for June, not because he really gave a crap about the resistance. But I will place him on the black side as a knight because he was helping June make her moves. So, as we know, knights don't move in straight lines. Neither does Nick, He appears out of nowhere. Always. I think back to that scene where June is she's like in the doctor and she's given a key, and this is the first time she escapes and she nearly makes it to Canada. This is when she's pregnant, maybe about 5 months pregnant, but it's the first time she escapes. Like, that move came out of nowhere. She didn't know she was going to be freed that day. So, he just appears out of nowhere. He operates in shadows, and he often defies logic of both Gilead and the Resistance, as we definitely saw in season 6. So his loyalty, it's ambiguous, and but the impact that he has, it's sharp and it's strategic, just like the knight in a game of chess. He saves lives, provides information, and he attacks Gilead from within without revealing his hand. Definitely a knight. So I would say the Marthas, moving on to the Rooks. Those would be our Marthas. And let me say about end of season 2, season 3, I was loving the Marthas. They're undercover, like they go unseen too. They have a night like quality about them, I must say. So, but the Marthas, their role in the resistance is huge. So, in a game of chess, the rooks are the cornerstones. They're quiet, but they're powerful, and they can move in straight, long lines when they are given the space to, just like the Marthas. So, the Marthas, especially in the mid seasons, like I was saying, they serve as Mayday's secret network. They're grounded, they're overlooked, and they're essential. They carry messages, they smuggle people, and they act with silent precision. So Martha's rooks all day. Now, specifically Emily, I'm going to give her the role of a bishop. So bishops are diagonally powerful, and they're unexpected, and they're deeply committed, just like Emily. Emily took her butt back to Gilead. After she found her wife and her son, she went ahead and went back to Gilead to fight. So she's driven by the principle and her intellect too. Her resistance is more surgical and it's ideological. She's been broken and she's been rebuilt. So her return to fight again, it brings some nuance to the game. And her trauma sharpens her insight. So, I'd say she's not moving in the way that you think she would move, but she's helping the resistance in the way that she's moving. So I'm going to give her the role of a bishop. So obviously someone's got to play the role of the pawns, and I would just say that would be the civilians and the unarmed resistors. So pawns are people who are often sacrificed to protect more vulnerable players, but with the right timing they can transform. So many citizens of Gilead, they probably begin as pawns, right? And if they get their bravery, you make it to the other side of the board, you get some momentum, you can change your piece. So your pawn can change when they get to the other side of the board. And that's why I want to go ahead and move into Janine's role. I feel like she started off as a pawn, and then she got to promotion on the other side of the board. So she was seen as disposable, just as pawns are. She was disposable in Gilead's eyes. They sent her to the, what do you call it? They sent her to the colonies. The colonies, yeah. So she's disposable in Gilead's eyes. But her growth, her survival, and she has these moments of clarity that make her a piece that's in transition. She's often underestimated, but her emotional insight and quiet rebellion gives her this depth and power. And she's way more than what she appears. So next, I'm gonna give Mora. She's about like Emily. I would say she's a bishop too. Her path is angled. It's emotional. And it's also driven by empathy and her rage. She's unpredictable in her timing, but she's sharp in purpose. She's not always on the front lines, but when she strikes, it counts. So her rescue from the Jezebels and her later activism show her, like, those are her diagonal moves, and it changes lives beyond the board. So, she's making impact, and it's not in the way that people think. So she's also a bishop like Emily, as I would say. And now, last but not least, I'm going to give my dog, Joseph Lawrence, the spot of king for our black side. Because, though he's not physically the most powerful piece, the king is not, their moves are. So the king is the one that the whole game revolves around. So he's politically crucial, and he is hard to pin down. They even talk about it in the show that he's hard to read. They have that conversation several times. And he goes in between being complicit and his subversion, and protecting himself is essential to Mayday's internal influence in Gilead. So protect Lawrence at all costs, because he's for you guys in his own strange way. and he's influential, you know. So the resistance needs him alive. We need our king alive, or else we lose the game. If they had lost Joseph Lawrence early on, they wouldn't have saved all those kids. Terrible things would have happened, you know. They would have went ahead and lost. So, but because he's kind of working undercover, he's a commander, you know, he can't make too many moves. So just like a king. So we're going to go over to our white side now, which is Gilead. And we're going to have to give it up for Serena Waterford. She's going to be our queen. Probably my least favorite character, a narcissist at heart, but she was definitely a queen in the way she moved. You know, she's intelligent, she's influential, and she's emotionally complex. She doesn't always agree with the king, but she plays her own game at times, and she ultimately serves the system. We saw her again and again try to empathize with the resistance, but she always ended up back with Gilead. You know, she ended up in New Bethlehem. She got married again to a commander. Came home from her wedding to having a handmaid in her home. It's not that she wanted it, but you know, we know deep down at her heart she's with Gilead. So she ultimately serves the system that she helped create. And her power is real. You know, it's not like an illusion of power. She does have real power. So, yeah, Serena, queen on the chessboard. So I would say Commander Putnam. I would say Putnam would probably be a knight because, you know, he's impulsive, he's self-serving, and he makes flashy and reckless decisions. I'll admit sometimes when I'm playing chess, I want to move that knight piece first before I even touch a pawn. So, I'm sure there's a name for it, but I'm not that deep into chess. Maybe I should read a book. So, you know, like many of the other knights on the white side, his unpredictability is what's dangerous. But it eventually became his downfall. So, he moves and leaps, and he thinks he's untouchable, but we be knocking them knights down just like pawns sometimes. So he thought. I would say all the other wives, and like along with Naomi specifically, are the rooks. So they're stable, they're visibly powerful figures, even though they don't really have a voice. You know, like they're there. They're more powerful than the handmaids. They're more powerful than, you know, the Marthas, all the other women. So, even though they don't have true freedom, they can move in straight lines within the rules of Gilead. Naomi especially represents the cold calculation and social rigidity of the elite. You know, she's for it. She doesn't even know why she's for it. But she, up until that last minute when she gave Angela back, aka Charlotte, that was a good move on her part. So that made her hard to place in this video, but it's still there. So they enforce without questioning, though, except for Naomi's last move. I'll say that all the rest of the commanders, besides like our main guys that we see a lot, our main characters, all the other commanders would be our bishops. You know, they represent this ideological zealotry of Gilead. They preach the scripture of Gilead, they justify cruelty with faith, and they make calculated moves in the name of order. So that's that. Now I will place Aunt Lydia on the white side, even though she got my heart back the last couple of seasons, and I kind of started to empathize with her. You know, she's just another brainwashed person trying to perform her job. But I would say that she's a knight as well on the white side because You know, she kind of seems like she would be a bishop because she's religious and ideological and everything, but she's actually a knight because she enforces the rules in this strange and unexpected way. She appears in one place, then another, just like the knight does, you know. Her loyalty seems certain, but her strategy is complicated. You know, she presents to the girls like, "These are my girls. I love you, girls. I don't want anything bad to happen to you." But really, I mean, she's for Gilead. You know, she's a wild card. She's capable of mercy and cruelty all in the same breath. So she's a weapon that Gilead has, and her personal code isn't always aligned with the system that she serves, but she still serves them in a way that benefits the white side. So I would say that Fred Waterford is our king from what we saw in the series. You know, he's limited in his movements. He's symbolic of Gilead's origin, and he's increasingly irrelevant as the game advances. Now, you'll notice if you play a game of chess, you're barely going to move that king piece until he needs to hide. Pretty much the whole game's about protecting him, but he's not going to be doing many things to make advances for, you know, he's trying to become protected. But when he does make a move, it's a good move, but he can't make a lot, and it's only one space at a time, you know, so he has to be particularly strategic. So, though he was once powerful, his influence does fade, and he relies on others. Like in a game of chess, you rely on all the other pieces. You know, the person at the top is often the person that does the least moving. So he relies on others like Serena, Lydia, and Nick to protect his status until he's finally captured, and his fall is the beginning of Gilead's unraveling. And you'll see, you know, like it crumbles at the end of the series, and it begins to crumble once they take Fred down. You know, that's when people learn that they're not playing. That's when it's game over. That's when, you know, that's checkmate, buddy. So once they killed Fred off, that was that. So and that's what makes him king. So I'd say the pawns of Gilead would just be the civilians and the Econo people, you know, the people that were just living in their families, but you know, under the rules in Gilead. So these are the everyday people. They serve as pawns, you know. They're used, they're manipulated, and they're sacrificed, just as a pawn is in the game of chess. So many are loyal out of fear or brainwashing, obviously, but some may rise to challenge the game, as seen with the Marthas and the rebellious handmaids. So when we reframe this story of the Handmaid's Tale as a chess game, we can kind of more clearly see how each character operates within the system of strategy, sacrifice, and survival. So June is the Black Queen, and she plays a long game of rebellion against a system that believes it has already won. So chess really isn't about who starts. It's about who adapts, who survives, and who strikes when the board is ready. And so we saw this throughout the show. Even pawns can become queens if they live long enough to reach the other side. So I really hope that you guys liked my idea for this video. I hope thanks for listening. If you like what I have to say, you know, feel free to subscribe. Thank you to all of my new subscribers. Um, yeah, subscribe, like, comment, and join the conversation. If you disagree with any choices I made about characters and their pieces, just let me know and we can argue. But y'all have a good day. Enjoy your weekend. Thanks again.